I think one of the hardest things for veterans that are transitioning out isn't necessarily the specific hardships and the traumas they've gone through. Not to minimize everything, but it's an eerie feeling when you get to show up every day, or spend months at a time with this core group of individuals that you go through those hard things and you develop this camaraderie and brotherhood. And the day after you get out, it's not like you're hanging out with them anymore. I caught a flight back, and then I had this void of all these individuals around me. So I'd say it took probably a couple of years to find a new tribe that feels like it really is understanding of your values and puts the team first. This might be too much information here, but in an effort to conserve time, because I didn't have enough of it, I didn't shower. I got in the bathtub and would soak and get on my phone so I could respond to people who were trying to make bookings as we were building the website. It was crazy. It was too much, way too much.
What mindset did the Marines instill in you that prepared you for business? Welcome to Built to Scale, the podcast where vision meets action. I'm your host, Quinn Schilz, founder of Master Roofing, and I'm here to pull back the curtain on building world-class teams, scaling companies, and turning bold ideas into unstoppable momentum. Let's get to work. On today's episode of Built to Scale, we're diving into the journey of a man who's mastered discipline, negotiation, and execution across multiple industries. Reilly Brennan is a Marine Corps veteran, a real estate investor, and now one of a half duo behind the newly acquired inn at Gitche Gumee. I might be saying that wrong. But this isn't just another business flip story. It's about the identity shift, how Reilly went from military precision to property deals to boutique hospitality. It's about a roadmap, how he built Clearwater Capital, how he scaled his team, how he handles risk, and how he thinks about legacy. If you're a young entrepreneur ready to learn what actually works, this is the step-by-step, no fluff breakdown for what you've been waiting for. Let's get to work. Thanks for coming on, Reilly.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Quinn. I'm happy to be here.
Absolutely. I'm excited to have you. It's going to be cool to see the virtual podcast versus the in-person one. So you're actually going to be one of our first virtual podcasts. So welcome.
Right on. I'm honored to be one of the first here. That's fun.
Awesome. I'm excited. So from Marine Corps to millionaire, how did you make that leap?
Through a long and dedicated period of missteps, right? And just really kind of finding out what you want to do. Ultimately, I did just short of 10 years, active duty Marine Corps. And then I was scheduled for another. Yeah, thanks. My wife said, you know what? Let's time out here. There's a lot going on. Our first 3 years of marriage, I was actually separated from her for 18 months. So it was not conducive whatsoever to lifestyle if you want to stay married. So we got out, moved back home. I've never been great at school. I've always been a very solid C student through and through. So going back to college, ups and downs. We relocated. I went through. The only degree I have is a 1 year American Welding Society. So I'm an AWS certified welder.
Nice.
Then I worked in HR for long-term care, and then I found real estate through a 90-second YouTube advertisement by a guy named Phil Pustiovsky out of Florida.
No way.
Yeah. And ultimately he's like, hey, I'm going to give you the 10 secrets of real estate in 90 seconds. And at the end, it's the pitch for a class, right? Or a mastermind. I was like, well, I don't need to make money I don't need to spend money on that. I've already got the 10 secrets, right? This has to be easy. And first flip property, fell flat on my face every way. I bought wrong location, renovated wrong, sold wrong. And then I found a mentor who really helped me see what the broader game is and gave me almost every tool in my tool bag that I still carry today.
That's crazy. When you told me that story, it made me remember when I was 14, 15 years old or something. And I grew up with my mom. We didn't have a ton of money, and I heard an ad on the radio talking about come down to the Sheraton Hotel this weekend. We're doing a masterclass on how you can wholesale properties, make money on investing, no money down, and that was my intro into real estate. And so when I don't know why I just thought about that. That was forever ago, and we ended up going down, and they try and sell you the course at the end, and then I ended up finishing high school early and got my real estate license right when I turned 18, and so I had always an interest in real estate too. So this is going to be a super exciting podcast for me. Um,
Awesome.
so what was your very first real estate investment, and what went wrong?
Still coming up.
I think one of the hardest things for veterans that are transitioning out isn't necessarily the specific hardships and the traumas they've gone through, not to minimize everything, but it's an eerie feeling when you get to show up every day, or spend months at a time with this core group of individuals that, you go through those hard things and you develop this camaraderie and brotherhood. And the day after you get out, it's not like you're hanging out with them anymore. I caught a flight back, and then I had this void of all these individuals around me. So I'd say it took probably a couple of years to find a new tribe that feels like it really is understanding of your values and, puts the team first.
SoCal homeowners, why pay $15,000, $20,000, or even $30,000 for a new roof when instead you can get a new roof for only less than $100 per month? Here at Master Roofing, we serve homeowners with high quality roofs with no hefty upfront costs. So give your house the roof it deserves with zero down and low monthly payments. Why wait? Click the link below to get you a roof you deserve for payments you can afford.
Yeah, everything under the sun, which was great. And I'll tell you why. So my very first investment was a $50,000 house, right? It was rough. It was built in 1862. This thing had gone through the Civil War, you know what I mean? So stone
Crazy.
foundation, low basement, but it was 50 grand.
Mm.
So I thought, well, this is everything I know. Buy really cheap and then sell really high. It's that simple. So paid for it cash, thought, man, I know how to paint walls. I can probably do these renovations. So I renovated it myself. It turned out, it was garbage. It turned out like complete shit. I'm just going to be totally honest with you. A friend of mine who helped me wrap up at the tail end just got his real estate license. So he said, I tell you what, I'll give you some free labor if you let me sell it. He lived 2 hours away. He didn't even work in the market, and he was a brand new agent. We put it up for what we thought it would be worth on the MLS. We maybe had 3 showings. Nobody wanted it. Nobody bought it. There were 0 offers except one. And it was a request for a contract for deed. So, I'm sweating bullets and okay, we got a buyer. How are we going to make this work? I should probably ask for 25% down, and then we'll structure it over a couple of years. I didn't credit check this person.
So request for a contract deed, it means seller financing. You were gonna be the one to. He's not going to the bank. He's I'll give you the down payment. I'll pay it off through you, and if I default, then you take back the house, right?
Yep, that's exactly right. So I'm essentially the lender for this person rather than going through the traditional, financing with a local or a Wells Fargo or Navy Federal Credit Union. This person moved in. There was what seemed like a weird split between her and a spouse. Things got crazy. They started missing payments. And it got to the point where, they're probably 6 or 7 months behind. And so I'd call and they would duck it. And eventually I had to file for foreclosure, which is not a great feeling. I know banks don't like to do it, but when it's very personal, that hurts even more. But, at that time, we didn't have a lot of income. We were relying on that monthly mortgage payment that we were receiving as the lender. And so we had Minnesota, we had to go through the court process, had to show up in court, testify, and see this person, right? So talk about really difficult situations early on with investing. And we eventually had to show up for a forced eviction, which means the sheriff county deputies escort you onto the property, and they actually have to remove the person from the house because they wouldn't leave. When we arrived there, she had left, and Minnesota gets cold, if you don't know. And so in the middle of February, when it's 15, 20 degrees below zero, they turned the heat off, they opened up all the windows, and they took a 7-pound hammer to all of the walls. They spray painted graffiti. And mind you, it's all lath and plaster. It's an 1862 house. Just in trash out alone for 1,300 square feet was $7,500. And I literally mean trash out. We had two sheds on the property. They were filled with garbage cans. Neighbors at the end told us how they never used a garbage service that came by. So we had to put another $40,000 to pay an actual contractor this time, right? This is several years later. So I learned a few things at this point. And he renovated it great. We found a good local agent. They sold it. And when all was said and done, I made $1,000 on that property over like 42 months. Just a terrible return. But I hadn't learned about the tax game yet. So rather than offsetting that, I actually got hit with the gains between like the 50,000 and where it sold at. So
What do
I
you mean?
think that was like a $7,000 loss overall.
So can you talk about that a little bit more with the how that last part you said about like how you actually ended up doing all right with the taxes? How did that happen?
So we did not do good with the taxes.
You did bad.
Of
Okay.
all the money that we put into it when we sold the property, um, it was so low. Like we sold
Because
it
you
for like
bought it for
100.
50K originally, right?
Yep. And then I think we had sold it around like 130. So all of my time, and then the second round of working with this contractor, I think we had like 129 into, or probably like 119. We had some realtor fees, and like my total net was $1,000. But because
Crazy.
I didn't know how to structure and show receipts to the IRS, I didn't know that, hey, if you are making repairs or improvements, that's a tax deduction. The IRS looked at it as, hey, you bought at 50, you sold at 130, you're paying gains on $80,000 right now. So then I had to write a check that year,
Oh, because
and
you didn't show like all that money you put to
yeah,
remodel it again and everything. Dude, that's crazy. So, because instead of being 80 in gains, if you would have showed, hey, I paid 40, you would only have 40 in gains and you'd only get taxed on 40 instead of 80, right? If you would
yeah,
have
and
done
it
it
would have
right.
even been less than that because I probably could have shown all the receipts and
Yeah.
like given myself a 1099 for the period that I worked on it
Yeah.
too.
Dude.
Yeah, but the greatest part about that, and the reason I love telling that story,
Yeah.
is because it's so inexpensive, and like everything that could go wrong on a $50,000 purchase did. Thank God that it was $50,000 and I wasn't getting into something for 500,000 right away. So it gave me all these really great opportunities to look and see failures and to learn from them at a pretty inexpensive rate. So I just kind of chalk that up to that's the school of hard knock tuition right there.
And it's super cool also that you got to, I mean, even though it's not a fun experience like going through, having to do the eviction and all that, you got to learn so much through that first small property of like all the steps and how to do everything, right? By
Yeah.
just by so in a way it's like you learn it probably helped you later on by having that going through that experience, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And the tough part is like in between the time when we first bought it and then sold it, I had been working for another property management company, so I learned all of these things along the way. So the exit and the loss from that property really felt like it was the catapult for things to be incredibly weary of. And it allows me to say to other people if I'm doing mentorship with them or some coaching or somebody just calls me for advice to say, hey, tell you what, I'm going to save you a whole bunch of heartache based on what you're telling me because this is a lived experience.
I love that. Where do you even buy a 50K property? Like when was that?
That, oh my gosh, 2015.
Okay.
And that would have been in a little town called St. Peter, Minnesota.
There you go. So go to Minnesota if
Yep.
you want to buy a property for 50K.
You might it's appreciated. You might have to pay like 58,000 in today dollars.
So you just bought a historical property. How the hell did that even happen?
Do you mean recently here?
I'm talking about Glitch Gloom.
Oh, yeah. So this is funny because even people in our area can't pronounce it correctly all the
Dude, yeah,
time.
I
So
know I'm not saying it right.
it's Gitche Gumee. So it's an Ojibwe term by the big shining sea. We live on Lake Superior, and that was their terminology essentially for like the ocean, right? But recognizing that it's not. So that one was work through tax records and skip tracing and really looking at information for In our area, let me backtrack a little bit and then we'll arrive at our point. In our area, a lot of people bought properties that are small little, boutique style resorts in the 1980s. And when they purchased, because interest rates were so high, they bought on a contract for deed or used, large amounts of seller financing. So as we kind of thought about our problem and considered what's the best way that we can buy this property or a property in this area, it was we probably need people who have owned it for at least 25 years. They're probably close to retirement age, and we need to see immediate value add through online bookings or record keeping, real bookkeepers and not just kind of pen jamming on stuff. And so we created a list of properties, my wife and I, and then I came up here and we started to stay at a couple of these properties, and one of them just really vibed with us. It was all unique style rooms. It was all kind of like this kitschy Northwoods feel, and fell in love with the property, talked with the owners. And when we were checking in, I said, I'm an investor. I'm actually looking for, some investments up in this area. Do you know anyone who's happening to sell a place like this? And the owner of that property was like, well, you know what? My husband and I have been talking. You should speak with him in the morning. I'm like, okay, this is a really positive sign. So the next morning, he kind of like kicks in our door and he's got a plate of pancakes and eggs and bacon and brings it in. He's like, so I hear you're buying the damn place. And that's where that relationship began from there.
So what's the most amount of money you've made in a single year, and how did you get there?
Still coming up.
Like this might be too much information here, but in an effort to conserve time, because I didn't have enough of it, I didn't shower. I got in the bathtub and would soak and get on my phone so I could respond to people who were trying to make bookings as we were building the website. It was crazy. It was too much, way too much.
What did it take to get there?
Yeah, for a single property, our first year on that, I think we did $285,000 in gross sales, and that was over a total purchase of 1.75. So it's lower than we'd like to see, but we also recognized it's going to take more than a year for some of these improvements. And I'm blanking now. What was the second half to that question here, Quinn?
And what did it take to get there?
Yeah, so the fortunate thing is it kind of has a cult following. So there was already a lot of built-in bookings that existed previously, and we were able to draft off the first part of that. Then we started making some renovations. We had some price changing, and the original demographic was probably, I'd say 60 and older would come up for a 2 to 3 day stay. And we knew that we needed to start moving more towards a younger audience. So what made sense to us was to find couples that are probably between the ages of 30 and 45. So a tremendous amount of what we've been focusing on since we've owned it is, what does our marketing look like? Who are we trying to connect with? And what style of renovations are we trying to create to entice those people to come in? A big shorthand to that has, this was all, done by a paper calendar. People would phone in. There was no way to directly book online, so we did that. And then just to make sure we understood what that process looked like, we operated direct booking only for probably the first, 12 months. And then we turned on the OTAs, got into Airbnb, Vrbo, and then we got a whole different set of feedback and demographic from there. And I'd say we're probably at the tail end of that learning experience to where we're going to start turning different levers at this point and really going all in on, some very specific advertisements or, events, etc. I'm excited to get into weddings. And so trying to hyper niche down to boost that revenue, because it's right on the lake. It's got a gorgeous view. It isn't necessarily, it's not the budget motel where you got $100, you're going to be able to stay. So trying to curate that for a specific demographic, I'd say is our focus right now to achieve maximum revenue.
At what point did you realize, I can't grow without a team?
42 days after we bought the place. We took over, and I wasn't working. My wife had left her job. We just relocated up here with what would have been our 7 or 8 year old at the time. And we cleaned rooms. And I turned rooms over for 42 days in a row, and immediately knew we We have to have cleaners. It sounds really silly now where I am and like, oh, why was that at the front of your mind? But we were really excited because we got to interact with the guests every day. We got immediate feedback from hundreds and hundreds of people right away. And then we're able to determine what is the standard that we expect for this property. So fortunately, we have a couple of younger gals that started cleaning for us up there, and that made an entire world of difference. And in the summertime, because our market can be incredibly seasonal, just the volume of phone calls that would come in was, I couldn't manage them all. So we started working with another group who would be able to manage our guest communications. They also happened to be a marketing team, and that alleviated a tremendous burden off of me of not being able to keep up with calling guests back, right? In any business, if you want to make dollars, you either need to be making an outbound call or you need to be the first person that picks up. And we weren't able to do that immediately. So some of those problems of we're losing dollars just because we can't do something as simple as, get the direct bookings or answer the phone call. Those were huge. And that really turned, my understanding of what we have to do to have a great foundation. And that's what's going to allow us to be able to scale into other opportunities like this.
Tell me about a hire that you totally regret and what you learned.
Oh, man, I'm going to get conceited for a moment. I'm excellent at hiring, right? I've hired dozens of individuals for previous companies. I've onboarded, probably 100 different people at different companies. And I've hired probably 15 to 20 for what we're doing right now. The problem that I didn't understand right away is with these previous positions, I was hiring people for jobs that were up here, maybe a little more robust. They had some different expectations. And so the copy that I'm putting together for hiring those individuals was elated and excited. And I didn't understand that I needed to meet people and solve their needs based on what they were at the time. So I actually had to trim down a lot of this enthusiasm and learned that, a lot of these people are really just looking for straight, what's my hourly pay? What are my hours? When is payday? Right? Just bread and butter, very simple. And I wasn't doing that. So I actually was able to poach away an assistant general manager from a Sheraton hotel. And she started working with us. And she said, I just want to go back to cleaning. It's simpler. And I think some of this unbridled enthusiasm and like, hey, we're going to create opportunity for you really made her somewhat uncomfortable because it was different from what she had experienced before. It wasn't the expectation that she was hoping for, even though there was a lot more opportunity if she wanted to take advantage of that. I kind of outperformed. So that was probably the worst one. And at a critical time when we were opening our other hotel, because she was a stud. And she left because there was too much complexity introduced in opportunity. And I didn't hear her when she said, I just want to clean rooms.
That's a super interesting perspective. So what you're saying is like, sometimes with these like more professional positions, right? White collar positions, it's like people want to see like the vision, where they're going, how they can be a part of that team. And like you sell them on that, right? But when it's, something more of like a entry level position or something where it's like a smaller business kind of position, you need to almost in a way like dumb it down and make it like meet them where they are, like you said, right? You said that in a nice way, and try and just like get the basics. That's for me. That's actually really good advice, because we're hiring a financial controller, and in that case, I will use the same kind of template with the new skill set for like hiring a roofer to do actually install the roof. And when you're hiring like the guys that go on the roof, I think it's actually harder for us to get candidates for that. And I'm going to actually try what you're saying and see if I can just make it simple of like, hey, you get paid every 2 weeks. It's going to be, this rate and all that. And I think that I could see how that can translate into being helpful.
And I imagine that's probably applicable across every industry,
Totally.
Right? Is there absolutely will be this core group, and you hope it's a lot that really buy into the vision. And we certainly have a core team that has that. They're excited. They understand where the boat is going. But I, for myself personally, what I've learned is we also have to have part of the team who really just wants to know that I'm working 9 to 5, 4 days a week, and I'm not getting a phone call for 3 days, because that's what their life has been based around previously. And that's really what they want. And there's not a right or wrong. So I think it's really just dialing in. And again, like I fault myself for this because I wasn't truly listening to what this person's needs were.
What's the biggest mistake you made with money early on?
Oh, probably like way back, or are we just talking investing here?
You tell me. What comes to mind?
You know, once upon a time, I had a tremendous amount of credit card debt and buying things that I couldn't afford because I thought that's what you were supposed to do. And I got bit really hard by it. And
like bankruptcy, or like
no, not that bad. Thank goodness. Thank you. But ultimately, no, it put me into this position where,
Yeah.
I had to go hat in hand and, start talking with family members and say, like, I'm in this terrible spot, or, they've, saw what I was doing and saying, like, you're really effing up right now, and we're going to help you through this, and don't do this again. And that was a tough thing because I came from an upper middle class family, but one of the unusual things is, like, we never talked about credit. We never talked about finances. We never talked about money. And for a young kid, who has a meager paycheck at the time, like, oh, well, if it's credit, like, I don't have to pay anything for this right away, right? And not understanding the implications. For the investing, I would say, and this is something I'm actually starting to relearn again, is that trying to diversify too quickly or into other things that are interesting draws away your focus on what really matters. So we have a couple of commercial properties. We just renovated a property near and dear to us in our neighborhood and built out a restaurant for an incoming tenant. And that went okay. But now that I'm looking at the returns perspective, if things have gone higher, and clearly, like, there's a cap when you've only got 3,000 square feet, it probably was something that would have been better allocated on something larger. And something within hospitality where I have the foundation of the team who is able to make these pivots with me. So there's been 80% of what I've been doing within the last 3 years, I would say, that I've been focused and moving toward that goal. But, a little of that ADHD that's like, oh, but this other 20% is really interesting. We should try that too and look at that. Isn't that fun? And it is fun for a while until after the money and the debt service comes in and you're like, oh, what do we do to unwind this and move back toward the guiding principle that we need to be focusing on? So I would say those are two different eras of learning the same lesson, ultimately, just in different circumstances.
What would you do differently if you had to start over right now?
I would look for an equity partner who had the same interest and still has a complementary but very different skill set. And I think I would probably be looking at hotels still. I love that space. I think they're undervalued. I love the idea of having employees and running some of the operations and being able to meet expectations for guests. And I would stay there. I would stay in that lane. And then I would also probably, focus on cash generating activities. And something I've really been pondering lately is, we're continuing to scale. Things are looking good. There's a lot of leverage here. What would it look like if 5 years ago I had gotten, the first 3 properties and I got them paid off? It's delaying that gratification a bit. Constantly we're, kind of inundated with, keep scaling. We want to be able to utilize like rapid growth, and that's great. But I also recognize, we've bought about $6 million worth of real estate in the last two years since we moved up here. And that's been good. And we've broken some things and we've learned from that. And we've learned what balls we can't drop. But also we probably would have had better sleep at night if we took it just a little bit slower and realized after we paid down some of this debt and we're getting a lot more cash flow, then we can really start turning that faucet on from a much stronger position of strength.
So kind of go back to your background a little bit. Like, can you walk us through the journey from getting out of the military to getting into real estate?
Still coming up.
What mindset did the Marines instill in you that prepared you for business?
Yeah, so ultimately we exited and moved back to my hometown. We were living with my parents and they said, hey, we're moving to Minnesota. I grew up in Western South Dakota originally, again, middle of nowhere. I guess I just like the Midwest. And then I jumped around between jobs. My wife was working on her master's degree while I was working on my undergrad, so clearly she took precedence. So I was getting other jobs. We followed her around a bit, and then it was on a Bigger Pockets platform after I, started this $50,000 house investment, saying, "Hey, I just moved to this area. I'm looking for a mentor," and immediately got snatched up by one of the greatest people I'll ever know in my life. Said, "Hey, dummy, don't do those things. Also, are you interested in a job?" And immediately I was like, "Yeah, I'm going to put in my 2 weeks here." So I got in as one of the first hires. I might have been the first formal hire in the company, actually. Then it was a small mom and pop property management company. And at that time, there were, low dollar amount debt partners.
Mm-hmm.
And from there, I think maybe we had like 30 single family homes at the time. This would have been 2017, 2018. And by the time I left, it had grown to about $330 million in assets under management. We had started multiple private equity funds. We had done some fundraising, going out to different conventions. We had 36 people that were hired on board. We just brought on all of our in-house contractors, which made a tremendous difference. And so going through such a rapid growth cycle in a short period of time allowed me to see this exposure to, kind of what that specific playbook was. And so I've tried to model a lot of what I've done based on that replication and treating it like a startup and understanding the numbers and like, okay, this, like I was talking about earlier, this, you got excited about this idea, it's not working. Okay, fine. Let's cut that loose. Let's go back down and let's stay as lean as possible. I got my real estate license, say, about that same time as well. And I haven't done a whole lot of transactional real estate. It wasn't something that warmed my heart. Certainly nice, being able to continue to put food on the table. But I realized the power of being able to utilize and leverage that for my own position and to have access to these systems and to network and to be able to write commissions in for yourself and the power of negotiating with that tool. And then we got to a position where we felt like we were comfortable. I'm like, I love this company. I love these people, but I also have my own vision of what I want to create. And that's when we decided to step away without any sort of actual plan other than, holy smokes, we have to buy a property and we need income coming right away. And that really fanned the flame at our feet to get moving.
What mindset did the Marines instill in you that prepared you for business?
Learn to suffer. Like hands down, things will be hard. And there, through hardship is when you really figure out who you can lean into, who shows up for you, and most importantly, how you need to lead and keep that face on even when everything is terrible in those hard moments and saying, we have the capability to get through this. It's not going to be the last time we see this problem. There will be things that will be harder from this. But if we all, pull ourselves up, we're going to get through this as a team. So I think that camaraderie and just understanding that things will be hard has really elevated my status for pain, I guess.
What was the hardest part of leaving that structured life and building something of your own?
Exactly like you said, Quinn, you left the structure. I think one of the hardest things for veterans that are transitioning out isn't necessarily the specific hardships and the traumas they've gone through, not to minimize everything, but it's an eerie feeling when you get to show up every day, or spend months at a time with this core group of individuals that, you go through those hard things and you develop this camaraderie and brotherhood. And the day after you get out, it's not like you're hanging out with them anymore. I caught a flight back, and then I had this void of all these individuals around me. So I'd say it took probably a couple of years to find a new tribe that feels like it really is understanding of your values and, puts the team first. So that was the scariest thing, like that rug getting pulled out from underneath you and then having to figure out where the hell else do I fit in?
Now, when you got into real estate, I know that house was the first like investment. What was the very first deal you closed in real estate?
So after that house, it would have been
Was that house the first? Was
the
that
house.
the
Yeah, the house was the first. The first one that
okay?
was successful was a duplex that we lived in and renovated on an FHA loan.
Okay.
And that was a property we had to sell when we sold our last portfolio, but it was great. It was a bigger number. It was a larger city. So I'm like, holy smokes, I went for 50,000 and now we're buying a duplex at 200, which, California is, absolutely nothing, but it was a lot of money to us at that time. And that was probably my favorite investment that we've ever made.
How much money did you start with, and how did you use it?
I think we got into that for $18,000 on the FHA. We covered, the 3.5% down, and we had some money for the repairs. We lived in it for a while. We rented out the upstairs. It was a great little starter home for our small family at the time. And then we realized, well, holy smokes, if we move out of this into a different house, like that still covers 50% of the mortgage on our new house based on what we could get in this downstairs unit. So we did that. And that was the catapult, like the really eye-opening experience of holy smokes, like what people are talking about are real. This is when, burring was, much easier at that time. And, there was a lot better appreciation in that area in South Central Minnesota where we were.
How did you structure your time early on when you were doing it all yourself?
Well, it started with after we transitioned up here and started our own company, it started with cleaning. And then from that, it moved immediately into hiring, right? And finding those reliable individuals. And then after we had some systems in place where we had people who were doing the real hard manual labor, that allowed me to pursue other opportunities. And so then I could find another property and realize, all right, well, now I need to hire some contractors. So probably that whole first year was, 40% seeking opportunity, 40% trying to connect with the right people, and 20% maintaining some of the systems early on.
Why did you start Clearwater Capital, LLC?
I liked the idea of Clearwater, especially living next to Lake Superior, which is like one of the clearest lakes in the world, as a metaphor for the transparency. So we don't have a ton of investors. The ones that we do have come in for some pretty large dollar amounts, and being able to keep that very tight and keep it relationship based has meant a lot to me. And, I think that's one of the things that I value the most is just having the transparency with people, because if both individuals are receptive to, critique, but it being purposeful and not just tearing somebody down, that allows everybody who is a part of the transaction or a part of the equity partnership or the debt partnership to have a lot of trust. And that's something that, you've talked about team building and, when you're hiring, like that is probably the hardest thing to develop with people when you're first meeting early on. And it, again, takes those hardships to really become formative and recognize like, okay, yep, we can be clear with each other. We can be transparent. We can develop that trust. So I think that's why the recognition that I'm in a relationship business that just happens to deal with, buildings and dirt.
What's the niche or gap that you saw in the market that made you confident this could work?
I think the fact that there were so many different pieces of real estate that were for sale in the hospitality business, and they were easier to obtain because they're smaller dollar amounts, and just nobody else was interested in them. And there were opportunities for the improvements to the systems right away from an operations perspective. Again, back to those online bookings, to the marketing, to bringing a team in place. And just knowing that this is really inefficient for one person just to answer a phone and manage a written out calendar. I have something that I can bring to this as a solution for what I see as a problem. And that was what gave me the most confidence to say, yep, I got tools in the tool bag. I can deploy those immediately.
How did you land your first investor or significant partner?
That was through family, actually, and not an immediate family member, but just having conversations and, talking for years, and eventually they said, I just don't like what's happening in, money markets, or I don't think I have a lot of trust in what's going on with the economy in general. Tell me about what you're doing. And I'm pretty vocal with most individuals. I try to talk transparently. I think I get on people's nerves sometimes, and I'm like, let's talk about finances, or like what it means, because that's really uncomfortable for a lot of people who aren't in this every day or have their own business. But it does intrigue some individuals, and they want to ask a lot of questions. And again, going back to that rapport and that trust, that's everything that's there. And then just through osmosis, having this strong core, that's branched out a little bit. And then being up in our area and getting to network and know people, it's become larger from that point. And it's great now because I can be selective about when I want to be raising capital, and specifically who I want to be, in that marriage with for however long.
So what inspired you and Brittany to buy the inn?
The view is pretty good. Like literally off the front step of any of those doors, you can throw a baseball and you're going to hit the lake. And it sits up about 15 feet from what's called the Scenic Highway 61. It's a gorgeous, gorgeous route. I don't know if you've ever been up to like northeastern Maine. It's a lot like that coastline. It's just rugged and beautiful. And we fell in love with the view. I like to think of myself like I'm a qualitative investor first. Like if I like this product and I feel good about it, as a consumer, I think I can speak on behalf of other individuals. Mm-hmm. And then it's a matter of, all right, do the numbers behave in the spreadsheet? And if those two things are a yes, then it's a no-brainer. We're going to pull the trigger on it.
I like that. What were the first 30 days like after acquiring it, besides cleaning?
Overwhelming. Oh my gosh. Yeah. There were, at this previous company, we had a team. So as I'm sourcing feedback from individuals, it's like, all right, great. We have a lot of feedback. And we also have a couple dozen people who can make changes and improvements to the process. And I was requesting all of this data and information from them right away. What's the experience? What do you think of the paint colors? Are the decks large enough? How is the pricing to you? And what I needed to do right away is just operate and understand and breathe and live. So it was too much. Like this might be too much information here, but in an effort to conserve like time, because I didn't have enough of it, I didn't shower. I got in the bathtub and would soak and get on my phone so I could respond to people who were trying to make bookings as we were building the website. Like it was crazy. It was too much, way too much.
Yeah, it's overwhelming to take over any business, right? Because there's just like got to understand all the systems and processes and the operation, and then all the things you want to fix. So, how did you decide what to preserve versus what to modernize?
So I think we kind of have like two phases to answer that question. So the first one was we were, I was scared to lose the current customer base. Like there's clearly, a total gross revenue amount that's there. And all the people who had positive feedback, I didn't want to make immediate improvements because I thought we would lose the customer base. Then realizing like, okay, we're operating out of a place of scarcity. Some months later when things got more fluid, we realized, well, we're also seeing this a lot now. It's no longer this, bright new shiny toy. Some of the furniture, some of the rooms look a little dated. Let's get the carpet, let's repaint, let's add a new beds. Do we need to swap out the linens? Should we add a fireplace into this unit? And starting to play around like room by room to see what feedback was for people. And there was when we took over, there was like over 3,000 followers on their Facebook page, which is really great for our area. And we'd post some pictures and there'd be people in the comments, all caps, like, what are you doing? What have you done to this place? And so you kind of like, oh, shoot, like, what are we doing? Like, people hate this. But then we'd get feedback from guests who were new, which is really what I should have been focusing on, right? Is like, listen to who's going to keep coming and ultimately is willing to spend a little bit more, because that's what we want to capture. So that gave us the confidence to start saying, all right, we're just going to renovate per usual. Like this is pretty old playbook, but when you're entrenched with it and you've got all these different emotions that are reacting to your changes, it's hard to step back away from that. So that probably took me a solid year before I really felt comfortable to start anticipating and purposefully making changes in the direction we wanted to see that business go.
How did you decide? I just asked you that. When you're building the teams, right? When did you realize that you guys needed help over there?
Probably immediately. But again, like it was the tail end of the busy season and we were thinking about like revenue, and I thought it would be super unethical for us to hire, our cleaners, our first people, and they'd be busy for 60 days. And then I'd say, hey, I know we hired you for like 35 hours, but we're going to cut you back to 15. So that was the first time we realized we needed help with that property. I think the next pivot that made a tremendous difference was I had hired an operations assistant last year. And not someone to manage my own calendar, but to physically like pay property tax and make sure credit cards are paid on time each month, open mail. She was also a cleaner too. And she's like, I'm actually getting my undergrad's in business. I'm minoring in accounting. It's like, holy smokes. Okay. So you don't want to be a cleaner forever. She's like, no, not really. So I brought her in and she's been a stallion. It's been great. She is able to just accomplish all these weird tasks. I had to ask her, I'm like, after we bought more real estate, I'm like, I don't have time to plan a party for a grand opening at the new hotel. Plan a party, get music, get a food truck, ready, set, go. And she killed it. It was fantastic. So yeah, finding those people that you believe in that also have a skill set that is complementary and understands, our budget for this is $5,000. We can't just spend whatever we want, because those are hard people to find if it's not their own dollars.
What systems did you put in place to manage your team as it grew?
I really like the transparency of like team communications in an app. So we use WhatsApp for our property management team. We also have our cleaning team. I can do one-on-one messaging, and it's a free platform. It's very easy to use. Second to that is we have one person who has been managing the schedules for all of our cleaners that are there. And then at some point, I'll probably turn this faucet off, but I really like everybody to see the feedback that everyone sees on the property. So there's, this one kind of hive mind of what we're really looking for. And then we'll start separating that, probably in the next couple of months. And then, I do a weekly call for an hour with our marketing team and with our guest communications team. And I think that's the biggest piece of our consistency is, can we communicate frequently? Does everybody understand what's going on? And are we having team meetings about what is supposed to be occurring?
At what point did you start creating SOPs and formal systems?
Later than I wanted to, Quinn. I'm not that guy. I'm terrible at writing SOPs. I just don't have the focus to get through it. I understand and know that we need them. But I maybe created 3. And so we had a staff member we hired, a couple of months ago who is very enthusiastic about, team dynamic, and even better was about systems and processes. So I got to work with her, daily for probably 4 to 6 weeks. Mm-hmm. And we really got an understanding of where our skill sets are. And we started creating, she was laminating documents and putting up what she called,
nice.
A whiteboard and paperwork and checklists for sheets. And we called it the communication station, or she did. That was her idea. I'm like, I love this. I wouldn't be coining phrases, but that was the best hire ever, is having someone who just
totally
loves the systems. I tried it on ChatGPT and it just wouldn't get detailed to the point of where we needed it. Mm-hmm. I got some skeletons, but that's my favorite my favorite hire so far.
That's awesome. What software or frameworks help you run your operations efficiently? Besides, you said WhatsApp, you guys are using that, right?
Yep. WhatsApp for the communication. And then we've gone through a couple of different PMSs, property management systems. We started with Hostfully, and then once we bought our second hotel, we moved into WebRes Pro. We didn't like that there wasn't single channel management, which means if you are on Expedia, Google Hotels, Airbnb, Vrbo, Direct Bookings, it didn't synchronize it into a funnel where you just have one point of communication. So as of like 4 weeks ago, we just moved over to our third iteration of software. That's HostAway, and that's been super smooth and really easy and helps facilitate because it makes not my life, it makes the life easier of people who are managing guest communication, and there's better financial reporting to that. QuickBooks has been incredible as well. That's pretty ubiquitous for everybody doing anything ever. We have an outsourced VA team in the Philippines that does our bookkeeping monthly. And then last, I would say Google Drive. Like, it's so simple, file sharing access, everything is there. We categorize everything from our acquisition documents, our financials, our growth, our insurance policies. So it's one centralized storage database for the entire
What's that one
thing.
called again?
Just using Google Drive.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
20 bucks a month or something like that.
Yeah, I think yeah, you have to you're really not utilizing technology if you're not using Google Drive for your business nowadays.
Yeah.
Do you how do you like working with the virtual team in the Philippines for bookkeeping? Like, do they help you with your payroll? Do they help you kind of with everything finance related, or are they just kind of like organizing things on the P&L? Like, how can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So ultimately, they will just spend, a couple hours each month identifying what needs to go into what chart of accounts,
Mm-hmm.
and the P&Ls, kind of self-produce themselves there. Once everything is uploaded, we have everything linked, so every time a transaction occurs on a debit or a credit card, it automatically goes in through there,
Mm-hmm.
and they're pretty efficient. So we also use Slack specifically because that's what they use as well. So I guess I have two communication platforms. But ultimately, they'll do a weekly review. They'll send, hey, we have some unrecorded transactions. These are new. Where do we drop these? We put them in. If we have a bank account that can't link to QBO, QuickBooks Online, for any reason, they'll ping me, hey, I need the statement for this month. So it's been incredibly efficient from a cost perspective. I think the work is probably 85% as good as if you had a professional bookkeeper here. And it's kind of fun because they must be trained on like sending you updates for their personal life. So like I just, Chell, one of our bookkeepers, just posted some stuff of like her grandmother's 90th birthday, and like they took a vacation to go ziplining. They'll put photos in there, and it helps you remember that these are not just cogs in the machine. These are also people half a world away who are working for you to help you out. So if you are worried about making the jump, for anybody listening, to using VAs for your QuickBooks bookkeeping, do it. I think you're going to be tremendously pleased with the outcome.
What's the company you use, and how much do you pay for it?
We use Ojo, and I think we hover between like $30 to $120 per month, depending on the total
That's
hour
awesome.
input. Yeah, it's incredibly affordable.
And when you say like 85%, like, is it just that some things get misclassified, or?
Yeah, misclassified, and then it would be different if there was somebody like in this town, right, who you visit with, or, you might connect with socially. So they might have more forecasting ability, or saying, hey, I've started to see this uptick here, and might be another pair of eyes to help make these predictions or voice concerns. I think they're incredible at just going through and, reconciling and doing a lot of the data entry. And that's really what we need more than anything.
Cool. I like that. That's I think that's going to be super helpful for somebody. So as far as like balance between people versus tools, like how do you balance investing your time?
Oh, I just went through a whole lot of people training with the opening of the new hotel, and then figuring out, we kind of had all of these tools were in place before that acquisition, aside from our new property management software. After that, I think the next tools that we'd want to use are finding, better pricing, understanding Google Hotels more. And then I think the people or the tools can come first. Either one is not incorrect. The next thing that I really wanted to pivot one of our operations persona to was becoming, a dedicated sales force. Like, get on the phone, start calling, wedding photographers, start calling wedding venues, start calling motorcycle clubs, getting to, the Facebook groups down in Minneapolis and Chicago for avid fishermen that take annual trips up here, and really trying to focus on how do we create a package that, is for 20 to 40 individuals. So we're also, learning to book the hotel for 5 days at a time completely out, rather than just trying to rely on like the 1 and 2 rooms at a time. So always, it's easy to get lost in the operational weeds. And then I have to pull myself back out and say, no, we need to be leading with revenue first above everything else.
How many doors, properties, or units do you manage now?
So we have 31 total doors between the 2 hotels.
Awesome.
I've got an active house flip happening right now, and then I have 2 commercial properties.
What kind of commercial is it? Like what kind of class?
So they're both Class B, I would say. One is an old VFW that's just on a great location. I got a smoking deal on it. I think they financed $150,000 at 3% interest, and
Awesome.
The bank at our lender, who's fantastic, was like, "Well, yeah, after taking a second, we'll count that as your equity in." So I closed that property for $0 down. That was
Nice.
awesome. And then we have another one that's in our neighborhood here that's had a shortage of restaurants. So I reached out to an acquaintance of mine who has multiple successful restaurants and asked him, "Do you know anybody looking to move?" He put me in touch with this gal who does amazing things. And I said, "Hey, I tell you what, I know you can't afford to buy your building right now. I know that, build outs are expensive for a smaller operator. How about I finance the build out cost for you? And we'll just make that in exchange for this lease rate over so many years." And she said yes. And that one, there were old 1980s carpet. And when we ripped that out, we found terrazzo marble under the floor.
No way.
Like, dude, that's one of my favorite moments ever in real estate there.
That's funny that they covered that up with carpet, right?
Yeah, depending on the decade, who knows why people do what they do.
So what levers do you pull to scale without losing control?
That's a good question, because right now it has been so much on the gas lately, and we're just kind of hitting a reprieve now. I'm always a firm believer that we need to have personnel in place and hire, and it's more expensive to do that up front before the next acquisition. So what we're going to do to help transition that and work towards more consistent cash flow is pivot towards multiple residential single family flips and be able to generate that cash flow through a different entity that I know I can put in and cover the cost for the people here. And then probably getting some very specific experts are going to be the next purpose for our hiring round. So I'd love to have somebody who wants to be doing bookkeeping outside of our hotels for my personal investments. And then again, I think the number one persona that I can have is somebody else who loves to sell and just finding ideas and likes the data and the analytics. So that's 3 people. It's tough to find people who love to nerd out on things and also like to be on the phone closing deals.
How did you change your relationship with money as your wealth grew?
I got more protective of it. Simultaneously, I also started to believe that things will work out better if I'm taking action with it. I have, with any friend group that you have, I have friends that are very conservative and they have incredible bank accounts and savings because that's their fundamental. And I think it's funny when you spend time with these different attitudes because there's some osmosis that happens there, right? So I've been very focused on the leverage and growing quickly. And spending time with them like, oh man, you know what? It does sound really good to have like $1 million just sitting in the bank ready to deploy. That's a great safety net for the portfolio here. And so I think we're probably going to ease back and then start collecting cash and giving us a better springboard so we can turn on, and be able to rapidly grow probably in another 2 years from now. So it's like we've kind of hit this plateau, we'll stabilize, we'll, stuff away cash and then be able to take on much bigger opportunities to continue scaling.
How do you and your wife divide responsibilities in business?
So my wife left the hotel stuff and she's a clinical therapist. So essentially she just tells me like, I'm so tired of hearing about investments. Like, can we please just watch another episode of Mad Men. Or on other days, she's like, okay, well, tell me what's happening with this. I'm really intrigued. I think it's probably helped our relationship because she wanted to get back into what she's been trained on. And I just kind of manage everything else that's there. But when she wants to be involved and she's excited about something, that also really makes me feel good too.
What are the strengths that you each bring to the table?
I am much more of an action-focused individual. And I'm like, okay, I've got a 70% solution. That's fine. And we'll figure out like the other 30%, but we're going to make this decision today. She's a lot more thoughtful and is intentional about like, if we were to look at the same problem, it would probably take her 3 times as long to come to a decision on it, but it would probably be the right decision. Whereas I'm operating from a perspective of like, nope, let's change this now. Let's see what starts moving the needle, or in a good direction or a bad direction, and I can just pivot from there. So I'm a little more freewheeling. She's definitely more conservative.
Any rules or routines to help you protect your marriage from business chaos?
Yeah, because we have definitely had some very trying times when things have been busy, or I'm getting a phone call at 10 o'clock at night and I need to go somewhere else. Be willing to let go and, of some of the responsibilities you have in a safe manner. Don't be afraid to bring people on for support. And ultimately, I think being able just to practice gratitude for this other person. Like it doesn't matter if I had like a really hard, day of like being all over the place and just everything goes wrong. And I, get home at like 8 o'clock. I still need to cook dinner and I still need to clean the kitchen. So just because you get busy with business does not mean that you get to abdicate your responsibilities to your family and your household. And that I'll learn that lesson again in the future, I'm sure, when I just get so laser focused on something. But coming back down from that is it's grounding and it's important.
Where do you see Clearwater Capital and the N in 5 years?
In 5 years, my guess is that we may be looking at exiting. Sooner than that, potentially, so we can, again, go back to, well, what can we do that has more economies of scale? How can we trade, 6 properties for a single property that's got laundry on site, that may have a restaurant, that's got a marina? It's just simpler to manage. And then there's just one bookkeeping record, one P&L. I like that idea a lot because it's really going all in on one idea that you believe in, that just has way more massive impact from each decision.
Do you want to open more boutique properties?
Hell yeah. Absolutely. Like if I could be opening one a month, I would. Not there yet, but I like being we have a wonderful designer and she does such an incredible job of giving a name and a narrative to each property. I wish I could hire her full time. In the future, maybe we'll have that conversation, but I like taking something that everybody else has given up on and breathing new life into it and being able to demonstrate that you can do something unique and there are things that are worth saving.
What does success ultimately look like to you?
I would say that's like something I should be able to pull out of my hip pocket. Success for me means that I'm probably working 3 months out of the year, spanned over 12 months, or that I have a season when I'm around and then just a weekly meeting, and being able to, for all the time that's taken away from my family now, to be able to generate that back into more time and to compensate them for going on this journey with me.
What's one deal that completely fell apart and how'd you recover?
Oh, we had a recent one here, and it wasn't a recovery; it was just a walk away. So we had a restaurant, kind of a multi-tenant building that we were taking a look at, and one of the tenants in there, we were buying this building predicated on the fact that they were going to exit without penalty to their lease, and we would be able to increase the rents from there. So we were approaching it, very tactfully with these individuals, and we're very transparent. And they had a very clear exit because they didn't want to participate in their business anymore, right? It was a get out of jail free card, essentially. Mm-hmm. And they kept moving the goalposts back further and further, and we recognized these are people that may be very difficult for us to be in a relationship for the next 3 years. And so my partner and I said, we have to walk away, right? Like there's a loss of $10,000 in non-refundable earnest money. which stings a little bit, but ultimately purchasing the building at that point would have been like, cutting our nose to spite our face.
Hmm. So what was your biggest oh shit moment?
Man, I feel like I've gone through a lot of those lately. We just had a fire at one of our hotels, and not through anything other than an electrical problem. And it was during our busiest weekend of the year. And
Wow.
that was the biggest oh shit moment that I've had. And I was just concerned for that weekend because it was incredibly busy. And so my stress level was already here of like, all right, this is the newly opened hotel. Like, let's meet guest expectations. We're going to be clean. What are people going to say about this? How are the reviews? Are we communicating?
Mm.
And then all of a sudden, I get a call from our county 911 dispatch. I'm like, "Hey, your hotel's on fire, dude." I'm like,
Oh my
"Okay,
gosh.
I thought it was here. Now we're off the charts, off the freaking charts."
The whole thing this is the glitch.
So this is our trailside hotel,
Okay.
but yeah, we have two out of our four buildings that are down as a result of that right now. So, but again, like the closer you are to it, the harder it feels. But now
Hmm.
that we're understanding how this system works, maybe I'll say this the same way I said about the $50,000 house. Thank God it happened at one hotel and not all of them.
Hmm.
Thank God it's only 15 units that are affected, and it wasn't 40 at a resort that we buy 3 years from now. But when this happens again, or when we have another thing that happens like this that's hard, we have the understanding of the emotional effect it's going to be. We know what the process is going to look like, and we know the people that are going to be in our corner. So it like my problem solving and ability for stress, just like now my tolerance is here, right? Like you're scaling real estate, you have to be able to scale your tolerance for problems.
Does the insurance they obviously probably pay to fix things or whatever, right? But they don't do they cover like all the missed rent that you could have made in the meantime and all the opportunity costs, or you don't get that back?
So it depends on your policy.
Okay.
And this is one thing that I've learned as a result of this is I'm going to have an insurance attorney probably review through every, multi-million dollar policy that I carry for here on out because they're 138 pages and there's so many different exclusions that can get put in there. Luckily, the agent that we work with in the company are incredibly reputable. And we knew that we had loss for business rent. We knew that we had structure coverage. One of the things I don't know that we have are, insurance payout for upcoding the buildings because they were older, and so now we have to meet, new building code. And we're not certain about where all of that lands yet. I'm 95% confident things are going to be very simple and
Hmm.
easy. But that 5% of me, right? Like there's probably some snake in the grass somewhere because insurance companies are typically not there to pay you out. They're there to identify how did this happen, whose fault was it, and even if it wasn't your fault, there's usually something called subrogation, right? And I'm sure you guys have gone through this once or twice where they look for, well, who completed this work before then, and they go after them to pay the insurance company back.
It's great. It's a insurance the insurance industry when a claim comes out, it's crazy like what they can cover and what they can't cover. And
Yeah.
um it would be a good idea to have an attorney look at those policies, especially when you're dealing with, commercial real estate, and you never know unless you have a professional look at it.
Yeah,
Um
exactly right.
what advice would you give your 21-year-old self just starting out?
Ooh, man. Buy, start a burr. Like buy a building. It doesn't necessarily have to be near you. Take some sort of action. Stop focusing on things that are bringing you any sort of material pleasure. Delay that gratification. And ultimately, you will discover that that delayed gratification really feeds and nourishes and provides so much fun. focus on focus on growing your net worth. Don't focus on where you're going to go party that Friday night and blow through the $600 paycheck that you have.
So I'll end on some rapid fire questions. So books that have changed your life.
I just finished a great book recently by a psychiatrist named Viktor Frankl called Man's Search for Meaning. And I think I read that purposefully after this fire to make sure that I knew that I was still in this for the right reasons because that was such a scary event. That was incredible. And then another book called Tuesdays with Maury, and that has to do about the capacity to be grateful for your life at the time of your death. So not the happiest books overall, but really I've tried to ground myself more recently in things that have made me seek purpose and fulfillment.
Morning routine.
Morning routine. I'm usually a green tea guy. I've been on coffee lately though, and that's like been a tremendous uptick. I'm up. First thing I do, I like to get on my phone. I like to see what's happening in our chats because some of our people start before I do. Make sure I'm not missing anything. Get through the emails. It's summertime, so our kid is home with us. I'll spend half an hour with him, make some breakfast, and then go out, get into the office, or go to my upstairs office and move forward with my day from there.
Favorite failure?
Probably that $50,000 house. If I didn't fail, I wouldn't have learned that I need mentorship for the rest of my life.
Worst business advice you ever got?
Don't do it. It's too hard. It's not worth it. You're going to lose everything.
What's next?
Next is getting our insurance payout. And I think if things go well, we're actually going to try to build back with 50 to 60% more units than we had originally.
Awesome. Well, Reilly, that was powerful, and I appreciate you pulling back the curtain and sharing the journey, the wins, the losses, the mindset, and strategy. These are the kind of conversations that move people forward, and I know that this one will stick with our audience. Thanks again for tuning in to Built to Scale. If you got value from today's episode, do me a favor, subscribe, leave a review, and share this with someone building something great. Your support helps the show grow and makes it easier for me to bring on even bigger names and incredible guests like Reilly. So thank you. Follow me, Quinn Vincent, on Instagram, YouTube, LinkedIn, and TikTok for daily behind-the-scenes insights and momentum to fuel your journey. Until next time, keep building, keep believing, and remember, legacy isn't given, it's built.